Welcome to Silmarillion chat number 8, I think we're on, and we're covering chapter 19 of Beren and Lúthien. Just chapter 19, but it is one of the longest in the whole book, at 26 pages, I think it is. It is, I think, the longest we've looked at so far, those of us who are reading it in a group. And it is the second longest in the Quenta Silmarillion after of Turin Turambar, and it may well be, it might be the second longest overall. I think it's the same length as the Akalabeth. So we're talking about the joint second longest overall in the entire Silmarillion book. And it's that long because it is more or less everything to do with, apart from small sections at the end of the previous chapter and at the start of the new chapter, it's everything to do with Beren and Lúthien, who are two of the main heroes of the Silmarillion. And that's an oddity, and it points us to the saga format of the Quenta Silmarillion, particularly the idea that you are not dealing with a novel, a prose novel, where there are beats and arcs. There are, and I would say there are arcs and stuff in here, but you're not talking about kind of beats, arcs, developed scenes where you kind of go like, oh, okay. There is a way in which the saga format breaches the classic scenes and moments format we think of to do with both prose fiction and to do with television. The idea that you build up things in scenes, you create value in scenes, and then you pay it off in moments. That's not an untypical way of looking at it. And the saga format of the Silmarillion is much more, in one way it's all moment, but it's not. It's that so much is left implied and is elliptical, and you're pointed towards rather than told. There's a lot of hinting rather than saying. But Beren and Lúthien is a very detailed story. It is one of the three great lays of Beleriand, if I'm right in remembering there's three. There's the Children of Húrin, or Turin Turambar, which I've actually got the book of. It's the only one of the kind of big edited books I've got of the latter end of edited versions after History of Middle-earth. That's chapter 21. We'll do that in 2 weeks' time. That's the longest chapter in the Quenta. And the third is the Fall of Gondolin, and I think that was the earliest to be written. And the Fall of Gondolin in the Quenta is split really amongst several chapters. It has its own chapter of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. That's not a spoiler. We've been told it's going to fall. But it also comes up in the Ruin of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin, with Huor and Húrin coming to it, and it comes up in of Maeglin, and it comes up in, I think it's of either Beleriand and its realms or the Noldor in Beleriand, where Turgon and Finrod are inspired by Ulmo the Valar to go and found their secret fortresses. So those are the three great lays, the three great stories, and Beren and Lúthien is, for Lord of the Rings fans, the most important and the biggest. Gondolin matters to do with Glamdring and somewhat Orcus, but particularly Glamdring, which Elrond tells us is the sword of the King of Gondolin, who of course is his great grandfather. But we know that via in terms of Beren and Lúthien, we know that we have an insight and an explicit insight into Aragorn and Arwen's relationship. They are a Beren and Lúthien for the modern age. Aragorn sees Arwen as a Tinuviel, a nightingale figure like Lúthien Tinuviel, who we've already been told, I think, in the chapter of Doriath. The one thing we've heard about Lúthien, really, other than, I think she might be mentioned like one other place or something, of the Sindar, chapter 10, I think it is. But other than that, we hear one thing at the start of chapter 10 of the Sindar. Though Middle-earth lay for the most part in the sleep of Yavanna, in Beleriand under the power of Melian, there was life and joy, and the bright stars shone as silver fire. And there in the forest of Neldoreth, Lúthien was born, and the white flowers of Nifredel came forth to greet her as stars from the earth. And I think in another place we are told she's very beautiful. But now, as we actually get into the story of Beren and Lúthien, we've heard that Beren is one of the outlaws who is with Barahir, his father, who has a ring from Finrod to mark their friendship, and this will become relevant both here in this chapter, but also in the future. The ring of Barahir is an heirloom of of the line of Elros and the kings of Númenor, and comes to Aragorn. So among the tales in Sauron of ruin that come down to us from the darkness of those days, there are yet some in which amid weeping there is joy, and under the shadow of death light that endures. And of these histories most fair still in the ears of the elves is the tale of Beren and Lúthien. And he actually says, oh, this is the Lay of Lúthien is a song, but this is told in fewer words and without song. He did write partial versions of this and the other lays as poems. And basically we get told, oh, you hear about Barahir, and that they end up hiding at a place called Tarn Eiluin, which is held in reverence, and it said that Melian herself had hallowed the water in old, and Morgoth couldn't discover it because it was semi-sacred because of this, and Barahir and his companions, the last survivors, the 12 survivors, hide there, and Sauron, the chief lieutenant of Morgoth, is sent to find him. And Sauron takes increasing precedence and has increasing importance through this. We've already heard that he's taken the tower at Tol Sirion and turned it into his tower of, is it Tolim Gauhoth, which was Minas Tirith, the Tower of Watch upon Tol Sirion, the Isle of Werewolves. He's a shape-shifting master. That's definitely something that should make sense to us in terms of later, though he, after the fall of Númenor, becomes a sort of accidental Morgoth parody act, being stuck in dark black armour. Before that, he's able to look fair. He's able to seem convincing and fair, and that's a lot of how he causes trouble with Celebrimbor and how he causes trouble with in Númenor. But here he is sent to track them down, and he is able to corrupt using an illusion of Eilinel, the wife of Gorlim. Gorlim being Gorlim the Faithless, one of Barahir's companions. We know he's already a bad egg, or at least rather he's a weak egg, it turns out. He wants Sauron to release his wife, and so he chooses to betray his companions, and Sauron then says, oh yeah, I'll return you to your wife, and kills him. He puts him cruelly to death. Sauron is always a liar, and in this way the hiding of Barahir was revealed. But Beren escapes. He is aware in his dream, and it's actually a wraith of Gorlim, like the ghost of Gorlim comes to warn him of his own treachery and to tell him to flee. There is actually, in a funny way, a redemption for Gorlim. Beren flees, and then he comes back, and he buries his father and swears vengeance, and he finds the camp of the orcs who have attacked, and he gets his ring back. The ring of Felagund was on the hand of the orc, which he chops off. And so he gets that back and he flees. And he's defended by fate, we're told. Providence, fate, Eru's control, the god's influence, or whatever combination of those things you want to say or put it as, is an important thing across the Lord of the Rings and the rest of the Legendarium. And here Beren escapes in this kind of desperate, courageous, vengeful act where he sheds the blood of the orcs and destroys many of them who killed his father and his companions. And he gets back the ring, and that's going to be relevant. Beren for 4 years wanders in Dorthonion, but eventually it becomes so awful that he decides to leave. He's pressed so hard he was forced to flee, and he goes into the Valley of Terror, the Gorgoroth, the arid Gorgoroth, the Mountains of Terror, and he thinks he'll go to Doriath. No mortal foot had yet trodden. And we hear about how bad this is. We hear that journey is not accounted least among the great deeds of Beren, but he spoke of it to no one after, lest the horror return into his mind. He's deeply traumatised by this time in this horrifying place inhabited by the children of Ungoliant. We're told that horror and madness walked there. So he escapes, and who knows how. Who knows what he had to slay or flee from. And he somehow passes... come by paths that no man or elf ever dared tread to the borders of Doriath, and he breaks the girdle of Melian, and Melian has previously predicted that everyone will be stopped from entering the girdle voluntarily, as in without permission, except one, except Beren. And Beren breaks through because he wants to. it's the providence perhaps of Eru, or it's simply some strange quirk of that border. No one else tries to get through that border. No, at least no elf or man tries to get through that border, but he gets through, and it's a funny thing in terms of the way in which this saga is elided and reduced. There's just a very small version of it, and we hear, oh well, Beren was too traumatized to talk about it, but he did basically escape from Ungoliant's children, Shelob's sisters, and break through, basically, by magic, into the magic wood. And he comes, and he's apparently grey-haired, traumatized, and in Neldareth he finds Lúthien at a time of evening under sunrise, as she danced upon the unfading grass in the glades beside Esquel Dune. And a relevant thing there is that is, of course, how Aragorn meets Arwen. Part of the comparison in the characters is Aragorn meets Arwen in a place with Nifredel, the same flowers at the feet of Arwen in Lorien, and he wonders whether it's an illusion. And all memory of his pain departed from Beren, and he fell into an enchantment, for Lúthien was the most beautiful of all the children of Ilúvatar. And we hear about how beautiful she is. She disappears, he's dumb. In his heart he called her Tenuviel, that signifies nightingale, daughter of twilight in the grey elven tongue, for he knew no other name for her. And then again we hear later, Lúthien is dancing in the spring, and flowers are springing from her feet, basically, as she dances across the wintry earth. And Beren is able to speak again and calls to her, and her doom fell upon her, and she loved him. She sees Beren and she loves him, and she nonetheless disappears, and Beren feels cursed by this. And he began the payment of anguish for the fate that was laid on him, for in his fate Lúthien was caught, and being immortal she shared in his mortality, and being free received his chain. And her anguish was greater than any other as the Aldalier has known. She's the first elf to accept mortality, to live and die as immortal, and she's also unique in her specific, call it her genetics. She's half angel. She is unique in that sense. Beyond his hope she returned to him in darkness. And no others of the children of Ilúvatar have had joy so great than the time is brief. Here's the thing, when we hear about, we know that Manwë has said, oh well, perhaps the great deeds that Fëanor and Fingolfin promise, out of evil will come good. Manwë says yes. Mandos says yes, but they're still evil deeds that the Noldor have done, particularly Fëanor. But this can be inverted here. Yes, they were evil deeds, but you have to emphasize here that Tolkien is saying, out of these evil deeds, good has come. No joy so great has ever been known. What's the price of that joy? Not to say it justifies the kinslaying at Alqualonde and the doom of the Noldor and the way in which all of their deeds come to naught against Morgoth. Not to justify that, or to say, oh well, that doesn't matter. But to say, yes, that was terrible. But nonetheless, and this is Tolkien's view, Eru has brought out of that the greatest joy the world has ever known. Out of evil comes good. Great line of the Hebrew Bible. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. But there is Daeron of Daeron's runes, the minstrel. He comes up a couple of times in this chapter. He's been mentioned before as well. He loved Lúthien, and he betrays them to Thingol. Remember here, none of these people are under the doom of the Noldor. Thingol is not under the doom of the Noldor. Daeron is not. Beren is not. Lúthien is not. This is just evil. This is the same thing as Eöl becoming so furiously jealous of his wife Arathel, and also being alienated from his own cousin Thingol, refusing to live in the forest of Doriath with Thingol. It's the same thing, that actually evil is not unique to the original sin of the Noldor in Tolkien. And that's interesting. You could theologically go for that, say, oh well, how's this meant to map to Tolkien's Christian beliefs? And it's not going to one for one, and Tolkien would not have expected it to. Remember, his accusation of Lewis is that he thinks Lewis's allegory in Narnia is simplistic one for one stuff, and of course it's not. I've put video out on that, but Tolkien certainly is not there. He doesn't expect that it has to map one for one. There is the original Son of the Elves, the Doom of the Noldor, but common evil just exists in their hearts. It doesn't stain or mark the whole people, but it does exist in their hearts. And here, Daeron sins, if you want to use that word. And Thingol is furious. Lúthien he loved above all things, setting her above all the princes of the elves, whereas mortal men he did not even take into service. Therefore he spoke in grief and amazement to Lúthien, and he eventually is forced to promise he won't hurt Beren nor imprison him. And Lúthien says, I've met this guy, basically. And then Lúthien takes him away from the March Wardens and says, no, I'm going to lead him in honour. And Thingol is really furious. Who are you that come hither as a thief and unbidden dare to approach my throne? Beren is filled with dread, both at Menegroth and at Thingol. But Lúthien says he is Beren, son of Barahir, Lord of Men. He is at this point the Lord of the House of Beor, of which no other adult men survive, apart from perhaps the very old. He is the Lord of the House of Beor, mighty foe of Morgoth, the tale of whose deeds has become a song even among the elves. And we know this because the 12 with Barahir is a song that the Noldor particularly love. Let Beren speak. What would you hear? This is Thingol. Unhappy mortal, and for what cause have you left your own land to enter this, which is forbidden to such as you? Can you show reason why my power should not be laid on you in heavy punishment for your insolence and folly? He is a proud man, Thingol. He should remind us, really, later of Thranduil in The Hobbit. And there's an important connection between Doriath and The Hobbit we'll get to in a few weeks. But here, he is a proud man who has seen Valinor, who is married to an angel, is master of the greatest individual realm, even if it is not as militarily powerful as some of the others, in the whole of Beleriand. Beren looks at Lúthien, and his glance went also to the face of Melian, and it seemed to him that words were put into his mouth. Fear left him, and the pride of the eldest house of men returned to him, and he said, My fate, O king, led me hither, through perils such as few even of the elves would dare. And here I found what I sought not indeed, but finding I would possess for ever. For it is above all gold and silver, and beyond all jewels, neither rock nor steel, nor the fires of Morgoth, nor all the powers of the elf kingdom shall keep from me the treasure that I desire. For Lúthien, your daughter, is the fairest of all the children of the world. Thingol is really offended by this. Death you have earned. Death you should find suddenly, had not sworn an oath. But he accuses Beren of being a kind of creeping coward in the realm of Morgoth. Beren doesn't take this lying down. Death you can give me earned or unearned, but the names I will not take from you of baseborn, nor spy or thrall. By the ring of Felagund that he gave to Barahir, my father, on the battlefield of the north, my house has not earned such names from any elf, be he king or no. This is a point where we've seen humans do great deeds. Barahir, we've seen him do great deeds. We've seen the Galdor and Hador, and we've before them Haleth. We've seen many great deeds from the chiefs of men, but here we have Beren stand up and be counted as equal to an elf lord who has seen Valinor, and it's not presented here as pride. There is something where Tolkien does have. He is hierarchical. He believes in hierarchy and order and class and things like that. But he also believes in inherent dignity. He thinks that people are just dignified. And so he doesn't think that you can simply say, well, I'm the king, I'm going to bully you. That's unfitting. And Beren rightly says, no, I won't take these names from you. You can kill me, but who cares? His words were proud, and all the eyes looked upon the ring, for he held it now aloft, and the green jewels gleamed there that the Noldor had devised in Valinor. And Melian counsels Thingol to be merciful. He's not going to kill. He's not going to be able to succeed in killing Beren, and their fates are intertwined. But Thingol is so unhappy, that these little short-lived men have now got this ring and now have Lúthien. But he says, fair enough. If you think you're so big, how about you go? I too desire a treasure that is withheld. For rock and steel and the fires of Morgoth keep the jewel that I would possess against all the powers of the elf kingdoms. If you go and get a Silmaril, you can have Lúthien's hand. Thus he wrought the doom of Doriath and was ensnared within the curse of Mandos. It's agreed, a pride and a greed for his daughter, yes, but then Feanor's chiefest greed was for his father, not the Silmarils. Fatherhood, this thing Clarky mentioned in our discussion on the Discord, fatherhood is a massive theme here. Barahir and Beren, Thingol and Lúthien, Finwë and Feanor, Feanor and his sons. There is this pattern of how fatherhood affects people, and good fatherhood and more broken fatherhood. And here the point is that Thingol thinks he will be able to fulfill his oath whilst not giving away his daughter, for Beren will die, because he knows that the siege of the Noldor failed, his own men had to fall back, the jewels are in the iron crown of Morgoth, countless swords and strong bars and unassailable walls, and the dark majesty of Morgoth protect them. Beren says, for little price do elven kings sell their daughters, for gems and things made by craft, but if this be your will, Thingol, I'll perform it. And then he leaves. And Melian says, basically, that this has doomed Doriath. Now is Doriath, you've doomed either your daughter or yourself, and now is Doriath drawn within the fate of a mightier realm. And Thingol says, I sell not to elves or men those whom I have and cherish above all treasure. And if there were hope or fear that Beren should come back alive to Menegroth, he should not have looked again upon the light of heaven, though I'd sworn it. And Lúthien is depressed. We now get Beren going to Nargothrond. He takes the ring to Nargothrond and asks for help. And that, he raises aloft the ring because he knows his father has said, Finrod, I rescued Finrod, and he gave me this, you can ask for help one day. So he says, no, I'll go and get help from Finrod on my quest, because he knows it's going to be tough. He's not stupid. And he arrives, and it turns out Felagund basically hears the story with disquiet, and he knows the oath that has come upon him for his death is long before he'd foretold to Galadriel. He doesn't marry or remarry the woman he loved, the Vanyar elf he loved, has stayed behind, and he does not marry because he feels the doom upon him that he will have to go one day without any additional ties, without any wife or children to be responsible to, and this is the moment. And he's honest to Beren. Thingol wants to kill you. The oath of Feanor is at work. The Silmarils are cursed with an oath of hatred, and the sons of Feanor would lay all the elf kingdoms in ruin rather than suffer any to have the Silmarils. And now Celegorm and Curufin are dwelling in my halls. This is after the Dagor Bragollach, remember, the great battle we've just had. And though I, Finnefin's son, am king, they've won a strong power in the realm and led many of my people. They've shown friendship to me in every need, but I fear they'll show neither love nor mercy to you if your quest be told. Yet my own oath holds, and thus we are all ensnared. Finrod and Turgon has started building ships to go to Valinor. They are the wisest pretty much amongst the Noldor. By wisest, I mean in terms of their actual actions, not in terms of their intelligence or whatever else. Real D&D wisdom rather than D&D intelligence. They know they can't win. They listen to Ulmo. They build fortresses, but both know how the doom is working. Whereas even the great Fingolfin, the greatest prince of the elves that they ever had in Middle-earth, does believe that they can somehow beat Morgoth. You get the sense Turgon and Finrod never think that. They understand other things are going on. They can't beat Morgoth on their own. And Finrod says, look, I'm going to have to go with him because of Barahir, and I want your help. And then Celegorm basically repeats the oath of Feanor. For the Silmarils, we alone claim until the world ends. You can't do this. We oppose this. And it compares Celegorm in his words. He gives his words as potent as those spoken Tyrion by his father that inflamed the rebellion. And then Curufin, more slowly and softly, conjures in the minds of the elves a vision of war and the ruin of Nargothrond. Celegorm and Curufin, the curse has advanced a pace in. It's become worse and worse. Things are getting... And I thought of all things, a comparison to Avengers vs. X-Men, the comic, where the Phoenix Force is spread amongst these five: Magic, Colossus, Namor, Emma Frost, and Cyclops. And the point is, the weakest fall to it first and are broken by it and lose the Phoenix Force first. But but that means that it all gets concentrated in the strongest, Cyclops, and he, spoilers for a decade-old story, he kills Charles Xavier. The point is the greatest monstrosities are saved for last. But here, Celadon and Curufin, the oath has worked almost to the utmost, and they are now openly corrupt and evil. They are doing just bad things. Mathros is not. He's done bad things, but he's sought to repent. But Celadon and Curufin have been broken by this. And yeah, Philippine's son was one of Valar to command them, and they turned their face upon him. And the curse of Mandos came upon the brothers, and dark thoughts arose in their hearts. And they think, well, we'll become the kings of Nargothrond. And Felagund realises he's forsaken and says, your oaths of faith to me you may break, but I must hold my bond. This is arch chivalry, arch masculinity in Tolkien's terms, that though all others prove faithless, he will be faithful. If there be anyone on whom the shadow of our curse has not yet fallen, I should find at least a few to follow me, and should not go hence as a beggar that is thrust from the gates. And his friend Edrihil and 9 others come with him, and they give the crown to a steward, and in fact Orodreth, his brother, the remaining son of Finarfin, becomes the ruler of Nargothrond. But Celadon and Curufin said nothing, and they smiled and went from the halls. Now Felagund and Beren go, and they go in disguise. They go as a company of orcs with their 10 friends, but they are captured eventually by Sauron. Felagund and Sauron have a great song battle. Remember, a big thing, I did a Tolkien trivia on this, a big thing in elven magic is music. Music in general is important in Lord of the Rings, but the idea that music is magical, and this is what Aragorn wonders about Arwen, is she a hologram like the elves make? She doesn't say a hologram, but like an illusion, like they sing into existence. And here they have a great combat of songs of power, where they go back and forth. And Felagund, at his peak, he brings up the might of Elveness, Nargothrond, the Sign of the Sea Beyond, Sand of Pearls in Elvenland. These great images of Valinor. And then Sauron sings back, basically about the kinslaying. And this breaks Finrod. Finrod fell before the throne. He's not broken by his own inability or weakness in himself, but by the curse. He knows he's guilty. He knows he doesn't deserve to win. And Sauron imprisons them, and one by one kills the companions of Finrod and Beren. Lúthien is meanwhile been imprisoned, and she is, and this is the thing, now we have this rather creepy and weird parallel between Thingol and his cousin Eol, who imprisons functionally Arathel and his son Maeglin. And that's an interesting comparison. It's not something innate to Thingol's character, necessarily, from what we know, but it comes upon him, and maybe this is the doom of Mandos, or maybe it is simply an actual flaw in him and in his cousin. The other close kinsman mentioned, Olwe, his brother, Thingol's brother, is over in Valinor, he's fine. But the other close kinsman, Celeborn, never has the same sort of thing said of him. He doesn't act the same, but both Eol and Thingol trap the women they love. And he traps Lúthien, but Lúthien escapes using her arts of enchantment, and wraps her beauty like a shadow, and makes a strand. She basically Rapunzels her way out, and she sends the guards to sleep. She escapes on a rope of her hair, and then flees. And here, the doom of the Noldor. This is a kind of Gollum thing almost. The doom of the Noldor accidentally doesn't work. Not in terms of accidentally, in terms of Eru, but it doesn't work as you'd expect. Celadon and Curufin are hunting. And they're hunting wolves that Sauron sent out. Celadon and Curufin still hate Sauron. They cannot be fooled by Sauron and Morgoth in that way. But they take their hounds, they're hunting, and they also think maybe we'll hear about Finrod, if he's died. And Celadon's chief wolfhound is called Huan, who is an intelligent wolfhound from Valinor, who is faithful to Celadon, who's followed him into exile. And it's Huan that finds Lúthien. And he brings her to Celadon, and Lúthien is glad. You're princes of the Noldor, your foes are Morgoth, and Celadon falls in love with her, in the sense that he's attracted to her, but he doesn't want to help really, because he knows where Beren is, and he doesn't care. He wants Beren and Finrod to die. And they go to Nargothrond, and they basically kidnap her. Again, there is a... Tolkien, in that sense, women are victims of what we would call abuse in this story, but they are not weak in this story. Arathel isn't weak, and nor is Lúthien. Arathel is less appealing as a character than Lúthien, but they both resist this kind of perpetual habit of broken evil men, basically, in these stories. But yes, she... They believe, Celyn and Curufin believe that Beren and Felagund are dead, and they think, well, we'll keep Lúthien and we will force a marriage upon Thingol. And then they become more powerful, they'll be in charge of Nargothrond, and they'll have the heir to Doriath. You know, you see the logic here, and then they'll have power to fight for the Silmarils. But Huan loves Lúthien as a dog for his mistress. He thinks she's wonderful. He realises she's innocent, grieves, and Lúthien tells Huan about Beren and the quest. And Beren is the friend of all birds and beasts, and Huan understands this. He can understand anything you say, but he's only allowed to speak 3 times. And Huan comes up with a plan, and for his first time, he speaks and explains it. And basically, they flee out of Nargothrond, and he even lets her ride him as a steed. And there's a good technical thing here, where generally Tolkien's very good at cutting back and forth between these sub-stories. Only over a few pages each, but we've had Beren, then we've had Beren and Lúthien, then we've had this meeting with Thingol, then we've had Beren going to Nargothrond, then we've had Beren and Finrod and the quest, and now we've had Lúthien's escape. Now we go back to Finrod and Beren, and finally, because Sauron thinks, well, I'll break Finrod. He's a Noldo of great might and wisdom, so the wolf comes to Beren, the last companion, and Felagund, remembering his promise, puts forth all his power and wrestles with the werewolf and slew it with his hands and teeth, but was wounded to death. Then he spoke. I go now to my long rest in the timeless halls beyond the seas and the mountains of a man. It will be long ere I am seen among the Noldor again, and it may be that we shall not meet a second time in life or death, for the fates of our kindred are apart. Farewell. He died then in the dark in Tol in Gowerhoth, whose great tower he himself had built. Thus Finrod Felagund, king, fairest and most beloved of the house of Finwë, redeemed his oath, but Beren mourned beside him in despair. So Fingolfin might be the mightiest, but Finrod is the fairest and most beloved. He's the best of the whole house of Finwë, and he sacrifices himself seemingly in a pit of despair in the place that's been stolen from him, and his friend who he saved despairs. But in that hour Lúthien comes, and standing upon the bridge that led to Sauron's Isle, she sang a song that no walls of stone could hinder. Beren heard, and he thought that he dreamed, for the stars shone above him, and in the trees nightingales were singing. It's just like when he met her. And in answer he sang a song of challenge that he had made in praise of the 7 stars, the sickle of the Valar that Vara hung among the north as a sign for the fall of Morgoth. Which, I don't know, is that the Big Dipper, perhaps? I haven't double-checked in history, but I assume it is. And Lúthien then goes, okay, well, we're going to go find him, sings more, wolves howl, Isle trembles. Sauron smiles, knowing this is the daughter of Melian, but all his lieutenants are terrified. And he goes out thinking, well, in fact, he sends out wolf after wolf, and Huan kills wolf after wolf, and eventually sends the sire of the werewolves of Angband, Drauglin. And even that, it turns out, Huan kills. Because it's promised of Huan that he'll die fighting the greatest wolf the world has ever known, and it turns out even Drauglin is not that. But Sauron turns into a werewolf and goes to fight, makes Lúthien swoon because of his foul power, and then Huan defeats Wolf Sauron. Never mind your Isildurs and your Elendils and your Gil-galads. Huan, the Wolfhound of Valinor, defeats Wolf Sauron, who has to flee. And, well, at least, basically, he'll destroy your... Lúthien negotiates. Either we destroy your form, and you flee to Morgoth and are punished, or we'll let you escape, but you hand over the tower without any further struggle. And then because Sauron could also turn into a vampire, runs off like a vampire and blows up, more or less blows up using songs of power, blows up the tower and frees Beren. And they bury Felagund, and it's clean again. Death hallows places, and it pollutes. Think about the Fell Beast and the Witch King polluting, I think, a part of the Pelennor in Lord of the Rings and Return of the King. But the burial of Finrod makes this place holy. And then there is, it says, the green grave of Finrod, Finnefin's son, fairest of all the princes of the elves, remained inviolate until the land was changed and broken and founded under destroying seas. We know the future, therefore. But Finrod walks with Finnefin, his father, beneath the trees in Eldamar. There is hope and purpose and redemption and clarity and cleansing. And it's complex when people get reincarnated or not. Amongst the elves, elves get reincarnated to humans. Don't humans go beyond the circles of the world eye to judgment? But there's something here where this is a chapter, and it's a chapter that comes before far harder tidings. But this is a chapter which reminds us that there is order in Tolkien's universe. There is a sickle in the heavens predicting the doom of evil. Put it that way. Beren and Lúthien are happy, but and Huan, having done his job, goes back to Celegorm. But they like each other less because Huan has betrayed him. But not betrayed him because it is not betrayal to do that which is utmost good. It wasn't good to imprison Lúthien, it was wicked. And it was no sin, therefore, to assist her in her escape. There is tumult in Nargothrond. Many elves that were prisoners in Sauron return, and they lament bitterly the fall of Felagund. And they say, look, Lúthien dared that which Celegorm and Curufin wouldn't. And at this point, this is the downfall of Celegorm and Curufin in their ambitions to rule Nargothrond, because the House of Finrod returns to loyalty to Orodreth. But Orodreth refuses to execute them, though they deserve it, because he says that this will bind the doom of Mandos further upon it. It'll be further kinslaying. But he expels them. And indeed says there won't be friendship with the sons of Feanor thereafter. And Celegorm and Curufin ride off. Now here's a name come up for the first time, relevant later. Celebrimbor, the son of Curufin, repudiated the deeds of his father and remained in Nargothrond. Huan follows still the horse of Celegorm, his master. Celebrimbor is ashamed of his father. He, like his father, is crafty. He will eventually be hoodwinked into crafting the rings of power with Tanatar, Sauron. But here we see he's a good man. They go to where Maethros is, and then Beren and Lúthien return to Brethiel, and they live there. They say, well, we want to be here. Celegorm and Curufin come up, and they're kind of discussing. Lúthien saying, I'll go with you to Doriath, I'll go with you wherever you want. Between the two, you choose to relinquish the quest of the Silmaril and your oath, and seek a life of wandering upon the face of the earth, or hold your word and challenge the power of darkness upon its throne, and I'll do either. And then Celegorm and Curufin turn up, but Beren stops them from... Well, Curufin basically kidnaps Lúthien, and Beren springs up and takes Curufin by the throat from behind, and Lúthien is freed. And he throttles Curufin, and it nearly kills him. But then Celegorm nearly kills Beren, and then Huan interferes and springs upon Celegorm and saves him. And Lúthien rising forbade the slaying of Curufin, but so you have this thing, and takes the dwarven knife, and then Beren says, I'm going to keep your horse for the service of Lúthien, it may be accounted happy to be free of such a master. Curufin says, go hence unto a swift and bitter death, and they ride away. And Curufin decides to, because he's ashamed and malicious, tries to kill them. Tries to kill Lúthien, and Huan catches one arrow, and then Beren saves Lúthien by being struck with the second. And then Huan goes bananas and goes after the sons of Feanor, and they flee. their fall is even more dramatic now. They are now not just plotting against the House of Finrod. They're not just hoping that Finrod will die. They're not even kidnapping Lúthien at this point. They're trying to kill her. And Huan does not consider himself loyal to Celegorm anymore and comes to them. Lúthien saves Beren by herbcraft, and Beren feels better, and Beren says, no, please stay, Huan, and look after her. I'm going to go with this horse he's got, and I'm going to go for the Silmaril. And he releases that, and he sings the Song of Parting, which I think is quoted in Lord of the Rings. Though all to ruin fell the world, and were dissolved and backward hurled, unmade into the old abyss, yet were it's making good for this, the dusk, the dawn, the earth, the sea, that Lúthien for a time should be. Beren, I think Aragorn quotes it to the hobbits, doesn't he? When they're in the Midgewater marshes, maybe. But Lúthien, this is Beren agreeing with Manwë that Lúthien makes the world worthwhile. You could argue all the bad things happening, but you can't, like, evil is monotonous. This is a point we've discussed a bit as well, that evil cannot fully destroy good in Tolkien's world, and that evil basically is monotonous and nothing. It is a negativity. It is not anything of itself, and therefore good is always more worthwhile than evil. And therefore this great mortal good, or great earthly good at least, of Lúthien is so worthwhile that these other things almost pale in comparison. The great evils we've seen pale in comparison because someone as beautiful and as brave and as decent as Lúthien has existed. Now, Lúthien somehow hears this song, I guess she's musically magical, and comes looking for him. And Huan consents to be a steed once more, because Huan is loyal to Lúthien. And then they join in the light, fair enough. No, well, in fact, I should say Beren is still ahead at this point. And then Huan and Lúthien are catching up, and they take on disguises. He took the ghostly Wolfheim of Drauglin, and she wears the Batfell of Thrungvethil, who's the messenger of Sauron, who flew in vampire's form to Angband. And so they also disguise himself. This is Huan's idea, apparently, perhaps. Or at least he goes and gets the resources. Beren then sees them. They escape through past this dark place, the Tower of Werewolves, the Island of Werewolves, and they meet again, and Beren is sad. I curse my oath to Thingol. I would that he had slain me in Menegroth, rather than I should bring you under the shadow of Morgoth. And Huan for the second time speaks with words. And Huan is a better and kinder counsellor than virtually anyone else. From the shadow of death you can no longer save Lúthien, for by her love she is now subject to it. Further counsel I cannot give, nor may I go further on your road. But my heart forebodes that what you find at the gate I shall myself see. All else is dark to me, yet it may be our 3 paths lead back to Doriath, and we may meet before the end. Basically, and it says she must meet with you your challenge, which is hopeless yet not certain. And Beren perceives that Lúthien can be divided, and they go, okay, let's go. Beren became in all things like a werewolf to look upon, save that in his eyes there shone a spirit grim indeed, but clean. And they go on the hunt. They end up at Angband, but there is a final defence. Karkaroth, who's been bred specifically to kill Huan, and they battle, and it's a great battle. And well, in fact, no, sorry, first, I'm lying, I'm getting ahead of myself. Lúthien sends Karkaroth to sleep with magic again. I think someone pointed out there's so much magic in this chapter. I think Knife is maybe. There's so much magic here that's so sparing elsewhere, but basically here we have the greatest magician, and in the negatives, that's a negative word, Galadriel thinks, but the greatest whatever that you want to, and of course here actually Arwen is who's the granddaughter of Galadriel, is also the descendant of Beren and Lúthien, so there's a common thing here to do with people who talk about magic. But yeah, the idea that this is magic, whatever it is, but this is the greatest magic user possibly we see in the books, at least in detail. Lúthien just constantly is doing magic and using song to put things into order and to fool the enemy. And they go through the gate, but they are terrified by Morgoth and stripped of their disguise. And Morgoth, looking upon Lúthien's beauty, conceives in his thought an evil lust and a design more dark than any that had yet come into his heart since he fled from Valinor. Pretty disgusting. But she manages to hide and sing a song of shadows, and everyone else is sent to sleep. But the Silmarils are still blazing. And Lúthien casts her cloak before Morgoth's eyes and sends him to sleep, dark as the outer void where once he walked alone. Suddenly he fell as a hill sliding an avalanche, and Beren is dead upon the ground seemingly, but Lúthien says no, it's fine, and so he comes and he cuts a Silmaril. We have the Silmaril now, and this is something where it was pointed out, I think Lawrence pointed this out, that really Lúthien is cast often. Beren is courageous and takes the quest and is willing to do it at all risk. And so that is credit to him, and he comes up with good plans. But Lúthien, it's Lúthien's power very often which carries them through. And then Beren does think, and this isn't presented as bad, maybe I'll get all three of the Jewels of Feanor, but such was not the doom of the Silmarils. The knife Angrist he's taken from Curufin snaps, and Morgoth wakes. And then Karkaroth wakes, and Lúthien doesn't have any magic. Beren nonetheless decides to fight Karkaroth. Well, not nonetheless, because Lúthien can't do magic anymore. Beren goes for him. Karkaroth isn't terrified of the duel, though he should be, and he bites off Beren's hand. And the Silmaril begins burning him, and he goes crazy. And this was of all the terrors that came ever into Beleriand, ere Angband's fall, the madness of Karkaroth was the most dreadful. The single specifically worst thing is when the light of the trees, the goodness of the gods, blazes and burns within them, within this monster. And Beren is poisoned. Everything is poisonous in Middle-earth. It's like Australia. And Lúthien draws it out, and then it looks like the quest of the Silmaril would have failed. But among all birds and beasts, the wandering in need of Beren had been noised, and Huan himself had bidden all things watch that they might bring him aid. Beren, one power we know he does is he can speak the language of beasts, and so beasts know what's happening. Huan has also said keep watch, and so yet again the Thorondor, the king of the eagles, Manwë's chief messenger upon earth, comes to the rescue, and well, at least Thorondor and others come and rescue Lúthien and Beren, and they see Tumladen and Gondolin below, and that's beautiful, but they fly over it, and Lúthien thinks Beren's going to die, and then they lay them together in Doriath, and Huan comes, and they tend Beren, but it's much worse. It's much worse, and yet still, somehow, Beren comes back. He's named Urkamion, the One-Handed. Suffering was graven in his face. But he's drawn back to life by the love of Lúthien. Love and really sincerely felt emotion and decision really matters. It's why Feanor's refusal to go up the Silmarils, even though he doesn't know they're already gone, that's part of the curse and doom, is he doesn't sacrifice that which is most precious to him for a higher cause. And here, Lúthien's love calls him back. And Lúthien is willing to wander. Beren is content, but he couldn't forget his oath. He held by the law of men, deeming it perilous to set at naught the will of the father, save at the last need, and it seemed also to him unfit that one so royal and fair as Lúthien should always live in the woods, as the rude hunters among men, without home or honour or the fair things which are the delight of the queens of the Ardalier. Therefore, after a while, he persuaded her, and they went home, so their doom willed it. But upon Doriath evil days had fallen. Grief and silence had fallen upon all its people, and Lúthien was lost. And Daeron the minstrel had left. He'd made music for the dance song of Lúthien. He'd loved her. He became the greatest of all the minstrels of the elves east of the seas, named even before Maglor, son of Feanor. But he seeks for Lúthien despair, and he disappears. He makes lament beside dark waters for Lúthien. Thingol wants help from Melian, but Melian doesn't counsel him because his own greed and pride, particularly pride, not really greed, has gotten in the way and caused this doom. Even Doriath, the uncursed kingdom of the elves, has been cursed now by the Silmarils, or rather by the oath of Feanor. And he hears Lúthien has been kidnapped, and he thinks, I've got to go to war with Nargothrond, and he asks for the Sons of Feanor to help, look for Lúthien, not knowing exactly what's happened. But then Karkaroth breaks loose, and things are going crazy, and alone in the messengers, Mablung, chief captain of the king, escaped, and he brought the dread tidings to Thingol of this happening. But Beren and Lúthien then return, and they come to the gates of Menegroth, and Thingol looked in wonder upon Beren, whom he thought dead, but he loved him not because of the woes he brought upon Doriath. And Beren then, I'm not even sure if this is meant to be good or not, but it's a very saga-like thing. I return according to my word, I'm come now to claim my own. What of your quest and of your vow? It is fulfilled, even now a Silmaril is in my hand. Show it to me. And then it's not in Beren's left hand, and then he shows that his right hand is missing. He names himself Camlost, the empty-handed. And then Thingol's mood was softened, and he raises Beren up to the throne upon his left and Lúthien upon the right. And it seemed to Thingol that this man was unlike all other mortal men, and among the great in ardour, and the love of Lúthien a thing new and strange, and he perceived that their doom might not be withstood by any power of the world. Therefore at the last he yielded to his will, and Beren took the hand of Lúthien before the throne of her father. Thingol is not utterly cursed, and he sees here the purposes of God, and he blesses it, and he gives way to what is good, and he recognises Beren. Isn't it interesting? He's not like other mortal men. And that comes up elsewhere. Is Eärendil like mortal men? Is Aragorn like mortal men? It's that men can surpass their relatively small lot and become great. And here Beren becomes great, and it's apparent he's great. And even Thingol, who saw the lights in the days of the trees, is unable to deny his quality. But people are afraid because of Karkaroth, and Beren, hearing of the onslaught of the wolf, knows that the quest was not yet fulfilled. He knows that though he has earned his marriage right by his argument, and Thingol accepts it, but nonetheless he knows that really the quest has to end with Karkaroth dying, and so they prepare the hunting of the wolf. And to that came Huan, the hound of Valinor, and Mablung of the heavy hand, and Beleg strongbow, and Beren Chamion, and Thingol, king of Doriath. We've pointed out many times, both in the group and on these videos, how aural these stories are. You need to hear them. And they turn east and north, and they hunt him down, and they fight him. And Beren stood before Thingol, and suddenly they were aware Huan had left his side and was looking for the wolf. Karkaroth avoids him and bursts upon Thingol, and Beren strides in the way and is knocked aside by Karkaroth as Beren defends Thingol. He's the son-in-law of Thingol, and he treats him as a father here. There's pietas. In that moment, Huan leaped from the thicket, and they battle. But in the house of Karkaroth, in the baying of Huan was heard the voice of the horns of Orome and the wrath of the Valar. But in the house of Karkaroth was the hate of Morgoth and malice, crueler than teeth of steel. And the rocks were rent by their clamour, and fell from on high, and choked the falls of Esquildun. Then they fought to the death, but Thingol gave no heed, for he knelt by Beren, seeing he was sorely hurt. And Huan slays Karkaroth. But there in the woven woods of Doriath his own doom long spoken was fulfilled, and he was wounded mortally, and the venom of Morgoth entered into him. Then he came, and falling beside Beren, spoke for the third time with words, and he bade Beren farewell before he died. Beren spoke not, but laid his hand upon the head of the hound, and so they parted. Mablung and Beleg, who we've heard of before, we'll hear of again, come to the king's aid, and they weep, and they take out of the belly of the wolf the incorrupt Silmaril. And Beren's hand disappears when he picks it up. The Silmaril is unveiled, and the light of it filled the shadows of the forest of them. Then quickly and in fear Mablung took it and set it in Beren's living hand, and Beren is aroused by it. Now is the quest achieved, he said, and my doom forewrought, and he spoke no more. So he's roused, and then he dies, having really finally given the bride price to Thingol. And Huan and Beren are brought back to Menegroth, and there's a great funeral. There she set her arms about Beren and kissed him, bidding him await her beyond the western sea. And he looked upon her eyes ere the spirit left him, but the starlight was quenched and darkness had fallen even upon Lúthien to Nuviel. Thus ended the quest of the Silmaril, but the lay of Lúthien, release from bondage, does not end. That is itself an incredibly provocative phrase. The release from bondage, the quest for release, does not end. But of course it means partly just the story hasn't ended. For the spirit of Beren at her bidding tarried in the halls of Mandos, unwilling to leave the world. He's a man, he should leave the world. But he goes to Mandos, and Lúthien came to say her last farewell. But the spirit of Lúthien fell down into darkness, and at last it fled, and her body lay like a flower that is suddenly cut off and lies for a while unwithered on the grass. And winter falls upon Thingol, and Lúthien goes to the halls of Mandos, which are the appointed places of the Aldalier beyond the mansions of the west upon the confines of the world. There those that wait sit in the shadow of their thought. But her beauty was more than their beauty, and her sorrow deeper than their sorrows, and she knelt before Mandos and sang to him. And this is the most incredible thing, I think, in the whole Silmarillion. The song of Lúthien before Mandos was the song most fair that ever in words was woven, and in song most sorrowful than ever the world shall bear. Unchanged, imperishable, it is sung still in Valinor beyond the hearing of the world, and listening the Valar are grieved. For Lúthien wove two themes of souls, of the sorrow of the Eldar and the grief of men, of the two kindreds that were made by Ilúvatar to dwell in Arda, the kingdom of earth amid the innumerable stars. And she knelt before him, her tears fell upon his feet like rain upon the stones, and Mandos was moved to pity, who never before was so moved, nor has been since. And it gives them the choice. The choice to Lúthien is to be released from Mandos, go to Valimar and stay there to the world's end among the Valar. But Beren cannot go there because he's a man. Or they might go together to Middle-earth without certitude of life or joy. She become mortal, subject to a second death even as he, and ere long she would leave the world for ever, and her beauty become only a memory and song. This doom she chose, forsaking the blessed realm, and putting aside all kinship with those that dwell there. And thus whatever grief might lie in wait, the fates of Beren and Lúthien might be joined, and their paths lead together beyond the confines of the world. So it was alone of the Aldalier she has died indeed. She wasn't half elven in some respect. She wasn't half human, which Arwen is. She truly dies. But in her choice the two kindreds have been joined, and she is the forerunner of many in whom the Eldar see yet, though all the world is changed, the likeness of Lúthien the beloved, whom they have lost. So we have set up the great parallel of Arwen and Aragorn. We have a unique situation, unlike Arwen, which is that Lúthien is not at all human, but chooses to die because of a deal she makes with Mandos, the imperturbable, unstoppable Mandos, who dooms the Noldor, who is only ever always saying, I know what's going to happen next, who says, no, I'll change my mind. I will give you a choice. You are the most marvellous thing ever to be. So Beren and Lúthien, Beren is incredibly impressive. He is above all men. Thingol's right in recognising it. But Lúthien in many ways, and Huan incredible as well, but Lúthien is a decisively important character. Not because she's very brave and she's very able and so on, but not because she, and this is important in the way that we talked about this with Arathel, I think, but it's important in the way that Tolkien talks about his strong female characters, not because they have to be the same as his strong male characters, but for Tolkien, it is that there is a way in which they are strong and imperturbable, inviolate, in control of themselves, refusing to be cowed, but also being dedicated to their purposes and their causes and their loves, which is particular and specific. And I think you can go back and forth, you can like it or dislike it, but it's very important. And Lúthien, I think, comes out of the Silmarillion as the most wonderful character. Like as Lawrence said, she's very special, and there's not really any other way to put it. That she is one of his great characters, maybe his greatest character in many ways, and she is part of what is probably my favourite chapter in the Silmarillion. Tell me what you think in the comments anyway. Till next time.